All right, so today I wanted to do something a little different. I do promise we'll get back to the formal talks on tefillah, but we can't ignore, when there's unique times of year, and it'd be a shame if we didn't spend time learning about them and discussing them, and especially some of the more impactful parts of the calendar. And I think one of those times that is sometimes overlooked or less appreciated is Lag BaOmer, which we're coming to. And Lag BaOmer is just a week away. 1 week from tonight is Lag BaOmer. So yeah. And Lag BaOmer, we have to understand, is, first of all, there's two major quote unquote events that take place corresponding to Lag BaOmer. One is that we know in this time period, the Gemara in Yevamos on Samach Beis tells us that this time period of Sfiras HaOmer, between Pesach and Shavuos, the Gemara says that there were 12,000 pairs, 24,000 students of Rebbe Kiva that died. And the reason the Gemara gives is Shalo Nahagu Kavod Zeh B'Zeh, because they didn't give honor to one another, which, by the way, it scratches, everyone has to scratch their head when they read that Gemara, because we're talking about Rebbe Kiva, right? Which is not the topic of today. Maybe next time we'll talk more about Rebbe Kiva. But Rebbe Kiva was the spokesperson for V'ahavta L'Recha Kamocha, right? He's the one that says in a couple different places in Chazal that Rebbe Kiva, V'ahavta L'Recha Kamocha Zeh Kal Gadol B'Torah, that V'ahavta L'Recha Kamocha is the overarching principle of the Torah, loving your fellow, right? Loving your fellow Jew, the mitzvah of Avas Yisrael. How could it be that his students, the ones that when you ask them, who's your Rebbe? My Rebbe is Rebbe Kiva, right? They are the ones that didn't have proper respect to one another. I mean, how could it be? How could it be? So there's a number of very nice explanations. We won't get into all the explanation. I'll just share one that I like a lot. Is I think it's from the Bnei Yissaschar. The Bnei Yissaschar, the Dinover, he explains that Shalo Nagu Kavod Zeh B'Zeh, they did not respect one another because their V'ahavta L'Recha Kamocha, their love of their fellow Jew, was too extreme. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that when we say V'ahavta L'Recha Kamocha, you have to love your fellow as you love yourself. Now, when a person does something, so whatever it might be, they have a certain opinion or they accomplish something or whatever it is. So you don't, give tremendous amount of compliments to yourself. You just live life, right? You just continue to live life. They took the lesson of V'ahavta L'Recha Kamocha to an extreme, and they said that my fellow is literally like me. And in the same way that I am not going to go out of my way to show care and respect to myself, although perhaps maybe we should do more of it, but it's not the natural thing that people do. So too, I'm not going to do that for my friend because I am so connected to them that I don't need to, right? It's like how some people, unfortunately can be neglectful to their spouse or their relationship with their parents, or because the love and the bond is so deep, I don't need to say it all the time. I don't need to, which is a problem. We should be conscious of those relationships even more so than we are of other relationships, friends relationships, community member relationships, neighbor relationships. But sometimes we are so connected to the person that I don't need to go out of my way. And sometimes I could be quote unquote disrespectful. It's not me being disrespectful. It's that I'm not being artificially respectful, right? So that was something that Rebbe Kiva students were lacking. That's what the Dinover says, the Bnei Yissaschar. Anyway, so we're in this time period of Sfiras HaOmer where Rebbe Kiva students died, and on Lag BaOmer the plague stopped. So that's why we have it as a celebratory day. And then the other aspect of Lag BaOmer that we're celebrating is the character of Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai. Why are we celebrating Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai? We celebrate Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai because it's his yortzeit. That Mag Ba'omer Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, arguably one of the greatest of all the Tanaim. Some would say even the greatest of all of the Tanaim. It was his yortzeit. His Rebbe was Rebbe Akiva, and he was one of the 5 students that Rebbe Akiva rebuilt Torah Shabbal Peh with. That after all of Rebbe Akiva's yeshiva died, so he had just a few students left. One of them was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and together they rebuilt the oral tradition.
Originally more students to die though, right? Of 24,000 students.
That was it. There was just.
So why do we celebrate? It's like that.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, it's like, what are we celebrating? That
they all die.
Yeah.
No
So it's so the I think Rav Mendel Kasher, I forget who says that that really the Gemara was not it's not that they died because they didn't respect one another. So I'll just share another explanation. I think this would answer your question, Debbie, is that that there must have been some sort of a crusade that was taking place. There must have been some form of a pogrom or something that was happening. And in the pogrom, there were 24,000 students of Rebbe Akiva that were killed during this pogrom. Now, how are we going to record such a thing in the Talmud, in our traditions, without it being a risk to us, right? This happens in a few different places in the Gemara where we have to be very careful with what we say. Like the Gemara is about Hu Ha'ish, about Jesus. The Gemara is very careful and censored to make sure that it's not going to come back and hurt us of this being in writing. So if we put in writing that there were crusaders that killed 24,000 students, we were concerned that it might come back to bite us. And so we needed to put the most blatantly obvious thing that it could not have been the reason why the students died, that they didn't show honor to one another. Of course, that's not true. We're talking about the students of Rebbe Akiva, right? So we're celebrating the fact that the pogrom stopped. So that could be as well. So Reb Shimon Bar Yochai on Lag BaOmer, when he died, the day he died was the day also that the Zohar came to light. The manuscript of Torah mysticism, which is not a very good translation, of Kabbalah, of kind of like the blueprint of Torah, the blueprint of what we learn, came to light, and that opened up a lot of the secrets of Torah that we as a people were not familiar with or were unable to have access to. And we'll talk about how Reb Shimon Bar Yochai gained access to it. But that came into the world. That light of the Zohar came into the world when Reb Shimon Bar Yochai had passed away. So we are celebrating the Zohar's coming to the world on Lag BaOmer.
So it's strange. It came into the day he died, or just on his Yartai another year. I mean,
on the day he died. Yeah.
What's the explanation?
That's I guess that was the culmination of it was a representation of everything that he taught, and so that came into the world, when he no longer was able to teach. Yeah. So let's take a step back though. By the way, the Zohar, just personally, I myself never formally studied Zohar. Any statements from the Zohar that I know, it's only because I've seen it quoted in other places. I myself never had a formal study of the Zohar, but my grandmother, Allah Shalom, told us that. So her parents were very unique people. Her maternal grandfather, her maternal grandfather died at the age of 112.
Mm.
And he was a Kabbalist. He was a Mikubal. That when he was passing away at the age of 112, everyone was invited to come see him one last time, and it was very emotionally draining for people, so they didn't want to come. But my grandmother went, and he gave her a bracha that she should have the power of being able to give blessings. And there are stories about my grandmother's blessings that are just incredible, absolutely incredible.
How old was she?
She was I don't know exactly. Yeah, but her mother, my great grandmother, was also like someone who had this kind of a koach, was living in the Zohar type world. And my great grandmother, she died tragically in the early 70s. She died tragically in a car accident. About a month before then, she says to my grandmother, she says, soon I'm going to pass away. And she was a relatively, not young, but relatively young, healthy, person. She said, soon I'm going to pass away. And exactly 7 years to the date, your father is going to die. And then she said that, and she said some other things that really were and they all came 100% true. It's like, so when my great grandmother died, my grandfather, my Safta told me the story multiple times, dozen times, maybe more. He came into the house to share the news, and all he said was, he quoted the pasuk in Eov. He said to my grandmother and her sisters, Hashem natan, Hashem lakach. God gives and God takes away. V'hi shem Hashem mevorach. And the name of God should be good. And then he tore kriya and started, and they started their avelis. After Shiva, my great grandfather, took his Zohar with a talus, and those next 7 years he spent basically under a talus studying Zohar, and then exactly to the exact same English date, exactly 7 years later, my great grandfather died.
Did she tell him that she had told him the date of his death?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know, but
It's like a nevuah.
yeah, I'm sharing the story because it's wild. But why am I sharing? I'm sharing the story because that's just a glimpse into the world of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, right? And in the Sephardic world especially, there's an emphasis on Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. You walk into any Sephardic person's home on Shabbat, you're going to hear the song Bar Yochai and Imshachta. You're going to hear the song Bar Yochai, and there's a lot of emphasis on the Tana Elokai, on the saintly, the holy teacher Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. So how did Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai become who he became? How did it happen? So we have to look at the life of his teacher, Rabbi Akiva, in order to get a better appreciation. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's teacher, Rabbi Akiva, he, along with three of his colleagues, three other rabbis, went into the Pardes, which basically means that these four rabbis, it was Elisha ben Avuya, ben Azai, ben Zoma, and Rabbi Akiva, went to go study Kabbalah. They went into Pardes. Well, Pardes is trying to understand, certain questions like, how did God create the world? How did that literally happen? It's things like that. It's entering into this world of Kabbalah in an extremely deep way. Again, like I said, the blueprint of the world and the Torah, and understanding God in a way beyond just a surface understanding of how we relate to Him. And they entered into that study. They entered into that plane, that world. When they came out, so Ben Azai died. He could not. He could not. He couldn't swallow that which he had learned. It overcame him. Ben Zoma became deranged. Elisha ben Avuya stopped being religious. He went off the derech. And Rabbi Kiva, the Gemara says, was nichnas b'shalom v'yatza b'shalom. Rabbi Kiva went into the pardes, went into that study whole, complete, at peace, and entered exactly the same way. Rabbi Kiva, of all the other Tanaim, was the only one that was able to learn the depths of God and the Torah to the extent that it did not affect him, only to the positive. He took it like it was just a perfect fit. So that was Rabbi Kiva. As we mentioned before, Rabbi Kiva had all of his students that unfortunately perished, and among the students that remained was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, when Rabbi Kiva during the era of the Bar Kokhba revolt, right before then, around the year 66, 67, was when the Romans started to gather up and kill these Tanaim and started these pogroms and their execution of the Jewish people. So Reb Shimon Bar Yochai ran along with his son, Rebbe Lazar, into the cave. And this is what the Gemara in Shabbos on Daf Lamed Gimel Beis outlines for us, that they ran into the cave, and in the cave for the next 12 years they were sustained on only water. There was a miracle. There was a running stream right there, and a miraculous carob tree. And just water and the carob fruit is what sustained them for the next 12 years. Now, what's so incredible about that is, of course, the miraculous nature. But when they were in the cave, they were studying together all these lessons from the pardes that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai received from his Rebbe, Rabbi Kiva. All these lessons of Jewish mysticism that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai received from Rabbi Kiva, he was studying with his son Elazar when they were in the cave. I'll just mention something. Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad, also known as the Ben Ish Chai, passed away in 1908. Aside for his book Ben Ish Chai, which is a halachic work, basically just going through basic principles of Jewish law, a very practical book, the Ben Ish Chai. He has a few other books. He has a sefer Ben Yehoyada, which explains the areas of Talmud that are agadic stories and lessons and things like that. It's a fantastic sefer called Ben Yehoyada. He has another book of responsa called the Rav Pa'alim, and in the Rav Pa'alim, someone sent a question to the Ben Ish Chai, asking him, saying that the Gemara tells us that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai stayed in the cave for 12 years, being sustained on carob and water alone. But the Zohar writes in Parshas Ha'azinu, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai testifies about himself that his entire life he never missed one meal of Shabbos. He had all shalosh seudos. He had all meals, all 3 meals on Shabbos, never missing a meal. Hold on one second. If he was only eating carob and only drinking water, so he didn't have his wine for Kiddush, he didn't have his lechem mishnah, he didn't have his Shabbos food. So how's that possible? So that's a good question. Maybe we'll answer that when we get towards the end of our discussion about Rabbi Kiva, about Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. But so this is what Reb Shimon Bar Yochai did. He went with his son Elazar into the cave, and they studied the depths of the Torah, essentially once again going into the Pardes. And now this is where we pick up the Gemara. Pardes is entering into a study of Jewish mysticism. It's trying to understand the blueprint of the Torah of the world, how God works. That's what the Pardes is.
It means orchard.
Yeah, it means yeah, it's a metaphor for an
orchard.
Yeah, the word technically means orchard, but that's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's what, but that's what it's entering into a mystical world. It's entering into a mystical world. Yeah. Yeah. There's a, it also is an acronym. If this might be helpful. Pardes is an acronym for Pshat, the simple understanding of the Torah. Remez are hints that are contained within the Torah. Dalid stands for drush, which is going more into the extrapolation of the Torah, and then samach is sod, which is getting to the background of what's behind the letters, what's behind the word, what's behind, not just between the lines. That's drush. Drush is what's between the lines. What's even behind all of it? That's sod. So that's what when we say nichnas lapardes, it means we're going through the entire depths of the Torah. So if you take a look at the sheets that I passed out, and even on the Zoom, it's not a problem. You'll be able to follow along easily. I want to pick up with what happened when Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai left the cave. I think we can learn a lot about the character of Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai and what made him so unique, and the reason why we celebrate his life on Lag BaOmer, I think really can come alive from this Gemara of what happened when he left the cave. Right? He was there for 12 months. He was studying these depths of Jewish mysticism with his son Elazar for these 12 years. I said years, 12 years, 12 years, yeah. And so what happened when they left? So if you take a look on line 35 of the Gemara, across from the arrow, there's an underline on one word, nafku. So nafku, when they left the cave, chazu inshi decharvi vizari, they saw people, farmers, that were doing work in their fields. They were planting and they were doing different things. They were pruning. And so Amar, their response to that, the response to seeing people working the field, farmers, people involved in agriculture, when they saw that, their response to it was line 36, Manichen chaye olam ve'oskim b'chaye shav. They're leaving the world they've left behind, they've neglected a world of life, meaning Torah, and they're spending their time in chaye shah, in a fleeting life, meaning a meaningless life. Look at them. They're just farming. It's meaningless. They should be spending their time in Torah. So says the Gemara, because they had that reaction, when they saw it, it was so visceral to them. They couldn't believe that people are spending their time like this. Kol makom shenotnin einehem. Wherever they looked, line 37, miyad nisraf, it burnt up. So when they looked at the corn farmer, they looked at his stalks of corn, they looked over there, all the corn just burnt away. When they looked over at the vineyards, so all the grapes just burned away. Not the people. Miyad nisraf, all the stuff just burnt away. So, I mean, it was because it was just so visceral of a reaction. It was like they couldn't contain it. They were just totally overtaken. And when they saw this, it just totally burnt away. Yatza basko. So then a heavenly voice rang out. Va'amra lahem, and said to them, Lahachriv olami yetzatem. You left the cave just so you can destroy my world? Like, what are you doing? You're destroying all my corn and all, right? It's like a heavenly voice screaming out, like God is talking to them and saying, what are you doing? You're ruining my world. Chizru l'maratchem. Go back to the Mara, go back to your cave. Go back to your cave. So the first question we're going to have to ask on this Gemara is, what happened here? Why was it that when they came out after 12 years of being in the Pardes, of living in that mystical world of just total Torah, that when they came out, they had this kind of a visceral reaction that everything just burnt up in front of them. When they saw people just, living life, farming. Why was it that they had such a horrible visceral reaction? That's question number one. Let's continue in the Gemara now. We're in the first word on line 38. Hadar Azul, they went back into the cave. Isfu Tresar Yarche Shata. They went back for another 12 months.
12 years. Months.
Now it's
12
months.
months.
Yeah. They went back for another 12 months. Omri, and they said, Mishpat Rashaim Begehenim Yud Beis Chodesh. And why did they only go back for 12 months? Because even the worst sinners only stay in hell for 12 months. They said, we're going to go back to the cave for 12 months. Okay. Yatza Batko. And then the heavenly voice came out again after 12 months and said, Va'amra su'u maratcham. You should come out from your cave. Okay, time to come back out. So they come out. Nafku. We're at the second nafku by the underline, line 39. Nafku, they come back out now. This is their second attempt of rejoining the world. Kol heichadavi machi Rebbe Lazar, have masi. Still, Rebbe Lazar was having trouble relating to the regular world. Wherever he looked, things would burn up. But Rebbe Shimon, his father, calmed him down and said, Amar lo b'ni, my son, dai la'olam ani va'ata. That don't get so upset. The world is sufficient with just me and you. Okay. So the second question here is, why is it now what was the shift that happened? That Rebbe Lazar is still having trouble, and Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, it's easier for him, but his reaction is one of like, you know what, like the rest of the world's still not getting it, right? They're still doing their farming, but at least I could be tolerant of it. At least I can be tolerant of it. Good enough for just me and you to live in the world. Line 40 by the last underline. This is stage number 3 now of them re-entering the world. Bahadi Panya Demale Shapsa. That they, at this point, it was Erev Shabbos. Chazu Hahu Saba. And they saw an elderly gentleman. Dahavinaka Tre Mahadne Asa. And he was carrying with him, this elderly man was carrying with him 2 bundles of hadassim. He's carrying 2 bundles of hadassim, walking on the road. Verayit ben Ashmashos. And he was running, it was ben Ashmashos. It was civil twilight, it was Shabbos. Amrule, Sir Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rebbe Lazar say to the fellow, Hani lamalach, why do you have these 2 bundles of hadassim? Why do you have these 2 bundles of hadassim? Amr lahu, they say to him, in the middle of line 42, L'chavod Shabbos, they're for the holiness of Shabbos. You want to honor Shabbos. L'chavod Shabbos. That's why we have the hadassim. By the way, many still have the custom. They specifically get hadassim to have in their house on Shabbos to give that sweet smell of the hadassim. They probably in a Gibraltar, they probably did that. No?
No. My sister's mother-in-law.
Yeah? Yeah, she has. So they say to this elderly man, why do you have 2 bundles? Why don't you just have 1? So Chad, he answers him, he says, Chad keneged Zachor. The elderly man says to Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai and Rebbe Lazar, I have 1 to represent Zachor. Zachor is Shabbos Likadsho, of the sanctity of Shabbos. Chad keneged Shamor. And the other is on the other mitzvah of Shabbos of Shamor, as Yom Shabbos Lekadsho, of observing Shabbos. These are the 2 reasons I have these 2 bundles. One is for Zachar and one is for Shamor. At this point, they say, Amar lo lebrei. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says to his son, Chazi, look at this. Kama chavivin mitzvos al Yisrael. How much care the Jewish people have for mitzvos. Yasiv da'ataihu. And at this point, they settled, they had clarity of thought, they're able to live in the rest of the world. So question number 3 is, how can we understand this 3rd stage? What's with the fellow and the hadassim, and why did that completely change their perspective? So I think we can explain as follows. And I think a few people give this explanation. That Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and his son Rebbe Lazar, when they were living in the cave, it was like going into the Pardes. It was living a world that was completely enveloped you in Torah, in God, right? A person who's had that kind of an experience, physicality is meaningless. That's why they were able to survive on just carobs and water. It was meaningless. The physical world becomes meaningless. It doesn't carry any weight or any value. You're living a completely spiritual state. You're basically becoming a neshama. Right? Does a neshama need to eat anything? Neshama doesn't need to eat anything, right? So when they have that kind of clarity and experience, and you go out to the rest of the world, and you see people working, you see people doing, working the field, for what? And that was the response. Manichin chai olam. You've left aside. You've neglected what really matters, which is spirituality, in order so you can be involved in the material world. And so when they saw that, it completely burnt up. It completely became meaningless to them. It was nothing. It was as if it was just burnt up in front of them. It was meaningless to them. They went back into the cave. 12 months later, they come out, and Reb Shimon bar Yochai at least is settling into the world, where he's saying, I still think that the way to live is through the Torah. But I can understand how not everybody gets that. Rebbe Lazar was still having more trouble with it, which is why when he still saw things, right, it was mussy. He continued to see it as if it was nothing, as if it was just burnt up. It was meaningless. It was